So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Donna, and I became a beekeeper the same year you did. Was it 2020?
Yeah.
First year of the pandemic. So I teach skating for a living, and when all the rinks shut down, I'm like, what should I do with my spare time? I think I'll become a beekeeper. So one of the things I did during the pandemic and everything was shut down was I worked at Trader Joe's just to kill some time. And the reason I'm telling you this is because I was in there recently and I was telling somebody that I had found a dead hive, and the girl goes, "Did you lose?" I said, "I lost 3." She goes, "Did you lose 3 bees or 3 hives?" And I just thought, wow, okay. So I did this autopsy with Yasmine. I don't know, some of you may know Yasmine. And unfortunately, she's away this weekend with her husband. And when I spoke to Yasmine, Yasmine goes, "You have got to go and find an expert to make sure that what we're saying is accurate." And I said, "Well, I kind of just want to put it out to our club and see if I can get feedback from the club." And she said, "Well, you can't do that." And Mark liked my idea, so I decided to roll with it. But in addition to that, I said, "You know what, let me call Jeff Eckel and let me get somebody out here that, let me get Jeff out here so that we can get somebody to back us up." So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go through my autopsy and show you what I found. So the first thing, if you find a dead hive and you really wanna try to figure out what happened, the first thing you gotta do is document, photograph and record as much as you can.
Is it on? Okay.
There we go.
Yeah.
So what I did was I went out and I took some pictures of my hives from every angle, just tried to document as much as possible. That way, when I start taking things apart, if I forgot what I did, I could go back and look at pictures. These hives are insulated from the outside, from the top, and I actually have insulation board on the bottom. So on the bottom is a screen bottom board. Below that screen is insulation board, and above that insulation board is diatomaceous earth. Because last year I had a nasty problem with ants eating through the insulation board. So this is taking the top off. Now, I just want to say that this hive did have food. I had opened it up a couple days before and thought, let me just give some of this food to some of the other hives. So that was filled with sugar and top. So that wasn't the reason. So once I took the feeder off, you could see there's the cluster. I think this is a video. How do I play?
Why, how long ago was these images taken? Days, a week, month?
Maybe a couple weeks ago. 2, 3. Was it more than that? About a month.
65-degree day, right? It's a warm day.
It was, yeah, I don't think it was really warm, but it was comfortable.
According to the BK podcast, he would have pulled this one.
Okay.
And this one.
Okay.
And then this one. Talking to this. And this one. And then worked his way in until where he saw bees in the seams. So it looks like I've got about 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 frames of cluster. I don't know that I can pull 5 out together, so we'll see what happens when I get there.
I can take that out in one big cluster. There's such a delay to this. How come? Do I need to aim it? There we go. So all I did was I took a couple of close-ups. Now, when Yasmine looked at this, she goes, "Wow, look at your bees." She goes, "These are actually newly born bees." It's like, oh, really? So Yasmine's observation right away was that I had bees that were just born.
Is that because they got a gray pigmentation? How did she assume they were?
Fuzzy?
Probably the fuzz.
Because of the fuzz. Yeah, so I just shot a couple close-ups. Then I started pulling frames, and what I did when I pulled them, I don't know how careful anybody wants to be, but I was like, let me place them exactly how I took them out of my hive, just in case placement was important and I needed to go back. So I started placing them as they were in the hive. So I pulled out the empty ones according to the podcast, and I tried to get it down to that cluster. So once I was able to get the 5 frames out in the center, I took my top cover, turned it over, and I took the 5 frames and flipped them far down. and basically started opening up with a book and really started inspecting. This was looking inside the first 2 frames, so you could say that's page 1 and 2.
And this is video, right?
That's not video.
Well, I mean, bees aren't moving either way.
Oh,
They're all dead.
yeah.
Yeah, for those that didn't pick up on that, these are all dead bees.
Yeah.
They're not moving.
They're just there. So Yasmin and I really started to talk about this. And the first thing is that, oh my God, she said they're starving, they're trying to eat honey. And I don't know why, but she thought all of that was capped honey. And I'm like, that's not capped honey. That's capped brood. So Yasmin thought they were trying to keep the brood warm. And I'm like, I don't know, this just doesn't make any sense to me. Like, that's just not next to the brood. So her and I just kept talking and going through it. And she's like, you know what? There's a couple of videos and you'll see it. She goes, I think they're trying to eat the young. So we started doing some research on the phone and we found that bees do eat their young. Now, some of you probably know this, but for me, I feel like I'm still learning. So I thought that was an interesting fact that they actually do eat. There's a certain stage of the larvae they will eat. On that, Frank?
Just his phrase.
Okay, that's coming up. I've got more examples of that. So.
This is really hard to do. Yeah, this is hard to do by myself. There you go. Yep. All right, that's a bee. Yep. Damn. That one doesn't look as developed as the other.
No,
Let's do
it
another.
doesn't.
Almost, it wasn't like, it was more developed and it was literally a bee. And then after that, we just kept pulling out these disgustingly gross ones. But what was really interesting is that I guess I did go in this hive around February, which meant that they were laying in January, which I was surprised. So here we've got an example of a couple different things, just open brood, capped brood, cannibalizing bees. From what we read or what we discovered when we read that article was that they won't eat the eggs, both young and old larvae protein, and then they won't eat the later stages because it's so close to being a bee. They figured let that go, but the article said that they will eat that one stage of larvae and feed on that. So this is grass, or Jeff, how do you say that? Guanine?
Yeah. Guana,
Guana,
which is like the bat food. Yeah.
right. So those little white particles is basically the fecal deposits of the mites. And I kept asking Yasmin, I'm like, why? That's the top of the frame. I'm like, why is it on the top and not on the bottom? Do you have an explanation? Do you tell me? Because I don't want to say it. Go ahead.
Bees, the cells are pointed down. And so bees, when they're developing, they're laying on their backside. The wings are always down on a bee while it's being developed. The belly, the gap in the top of the frame or top of the cell, and the bee is where the mites live, in that gap, because the bee is laying on its back, developing, And that's where they live, is in that gap on the top of the frame, on the top of the cell, excuse me. That's why if you have mites,
It's why it's on the top.
they poop on the top of the cell because that's where they exist during their breeding.
And they use it like a communal bathroom, all the mothers in the cell are using
One spot.
I don't know that I ever would even have noticed that unless Yasmin had brought that up. That's just showing my bottom board. You can see where the cluster was pretty much organized over that dark spot. And that was just a little bit of debris and wax and bead parts. So what you're looking at is my screen bottom board. The white stuff is the diatomaceous earth, and then underneath that is the insulation board. When we went and looked through that, we didn't find a lot of mites, which is odd because obviously we had evidence of it. And this queen I did not find in this, but I actually went through 2 dead hives. I found this one in my new hive. So I've got some examples of, Yasmin went ahead and gave me a tube if anybody wants to see that. This is that queen. She's gotten a lot smaller.
Did you do a mite wash?
Then?
Yeah.
No, but I still have the bees in a bag.
Wash them.
I could, yeah, that's a good idea.
It'll be higher than normal.
You'll find mites.
So when I did the autopsy, I actually got a table that was out in my yard. And I just put down a whole bunch of old Amazon cardboard, and just opened up everything on that. And then, let's see if it's still. Yeah, so here you can see the bees are embedded. If anybody wants to, I can pass it around or you can come up and take a look. But I think we break after this, right? Yeah. So, and then there's another one. Same thing.
Like when they're in the cells like that, Donna, most of the time it's not actually cannibalizing, it's them just filling up the void space and they're shivering inside those cells to keep the surrounding temperature warmer. It's a way of getting the cluster tighter and getting more
So then
violent,
Yasmin was right then when she said that they were just trying to,
keep things warm.
They stay in their clusters, yeah. Bees face down.
okay. So you don't think they were eating the young because it was in the middle of all the brood.
That's right.
That's where they're keeping it.
It's like they basically vibrate, right? So by getting into the depth of the cell closer, they can actually get transfer of heat into the wax.
So are those the bees that were born that just turned around and got warm?
Oh, so they rotate in that position. It's like they rotate jobs with feeding, right? So they in the cluster form, they're always moving and rotating through. So they're basically vibrating the cells, getting the warmth through the cell.
I think that's how the heat's generated. The outer shell of the cluster is
like a
insulating
container.
and keeping that heat inside.
So
Sure,
what
yeah.
was your takeaway from the autopsy?
Yeah, what do you think? What's the
So-
final diagnosis?
My thought was that obviously they had mites because they're all that frass. So the mites definitely weakened them. And then I didn't know if maybe that was a sign of starvation. I mean, I had sugar up top, but were they lacking protein because they were making brood? So
Do you know how many frames of bees you had going in? Like maybe the biomass was not quite large enough.
So that box was a 10 frame that was made by combining 2 nuke. There was also a nuke next to it that was pretty full and that one died as well. Pretty much everything on the side of my yard died, but everything in my original space, when you came over where you saw it, everything there is still alive.
Was the shim a deep box? Looked like that sugar shim with a full size. Okay. I
Yeah.
misunderstood the picture.
So-
Screening under the food,
Say that again?
the screening under the food.
Yeah,
Helping the.
yeah, big enough, small enough that the bees couldn't get through. So the CC,
Was the screen pretty close to the cluster or was it an inch or?
the screen was literally right above the cluster. So all they had to do was come to the top of the frame and
They can
be
touch the screen.
correct.
And
Yeah.
what was there? Sugar bricks on it?
Sugar bricks,
Sugar
not the
brick.
way you make it, but the way I made it.
Sugar bricks.
Yep. Yeah. So I mean, if the sugar bricks had been angled, right, like they wouldn't have been able to get to it. So I would go in and just kind of scrape them on the screen, make sure they always had it in contact with the screen.
So what's your final diagnosis? Commit.
Mine was the committee, yeah, what do you guys say?
No, you can, then we'll have Jeff be the expert, opinion of what he saw. So what do you,
we all do it. We all have dead hives. We have to go in there. We have to make an assessment of what happened. So here's your, what do you think happened for this hive?
Yes, me or them.
You.
Cause
Hive.
I told you, I thought it was mites, obviously weakened them. I think it was three things. I think it was mites, probably one. Possibly it's a little bit of starvation, and then three, I actually think it was location. I don't think the sun was as good in that location as it is where they are still surviving. So I think the extra cold,
So
the
Jeff,
mites,
come on up.
yeah, please.
I'm gonna put Jeff on the spot.
I was gonna bring them up.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, Don.
Yeah.
Bring Jeff up, introduce yourself, and you will give us your opinion on this.
Hello, my name is Jeff Eckel. I am one of the apiary inspectors in Pennsylvania. I do Berks, Phelps, Chester, Montgomery, Philadelphia, and Delaware counties.
He's the busiest. I expect a return call for like 2 weeks, even though I'm on the waiting list with next messages.
If any, so you are required to register your hives in Pennsylvania, most of you are registered, but if anybody's not, and just getting started, I do have registration papers and I have a business card with my phone number and email. So if anyone wants that file,
There's a white one that came out of your door.
Oh my God.
I mean, I agree.
Come on, guys, please.
Looking for mite frass is a great indicator. A lot of us use hives for mites. And they're always playing a role, whether cause it or not. My personal goal for myself is not to lose any colonies before New Year's Day. If you're losing them right in the beginning of winter, it's probably mites. It's probably my fault. So that's my own personal goal. We pulled the frames out of the sidewalls and they're like empty, right?
Yeah.
So that's a red flag for me. Like I want honey for the wall. So
They have it going in.
right, exactly. So feeding in late summer, fall, to rate up is good. I use a scale, so little fishing scale or whatever, but hook the back of the hive, get that weight, hook the front of the hive, get that weight. It's probably not the most accurate way to do it, but it gives me a target number. And for a single deep or double deep, I have my targets. I can feed until I get that weight, so that might be helpful. Stores so when I work my own bees, I'll tip the boxes and look from underneath. That's a great way to find swarm cells. It's a good way this time of year to count frames of bees. It's kind of like a commercial pollinator practice. Farmers paying you for 8 frame average, for almond pollination. The way you count those 8 frames is not from the top. From the top, it looks like, oh, I got 10 frames of bees. And when you tip the box and it looks from underneath, and it's only 4 frames or 5 frames or 6 frames. So that's a good way. So when you flip these frames over, you had bees, but they were only clustered maybe halfway down the frame, or I'm estimating a little bit. So kind of a smaller cluster again, but that kind of puts the mites. So American foulbrood is highly contagious, very serious bee disease. We all should understand what that is and know how to identify it. And when you look into a Deadout, it's good to kind of check that off the list and make sure that's not a problem because yeah, so there was at least one picture with maybe with the brood and the bees clustered in the comb, and there was like one perforation in the taproot. That's common. Deadout. It took me some lots of things.
Holes in the brood.
Yeah, so like right here, this bottom corner.
Okay.
So that's a red flag for me as an inspector, and whether the comb is dead or live, you can find those perforations. And so take the hive tool, carry toothpicks, is probably a better way to do it. So that so box of toothpicks in your beekeeping kit. And folks, you can untap it with the toothpicks as a hive tool and take a look inside. American foulbrood kills the pre-pupa, so it looks like a larva, but it's standing up in the cell. The hood's just starting to develop, but it looks like a larva, not pupa. And so if you untap it, you can kind of see, is it a bee about to emerge? Is it a young pupa with purple eyes and pink eyes? Or is it a pre-pupa? And so you can know kind of the age of the bee and the pupa or later, probably not American foulbrood, but those in earlier stage. So checking that out, you can also do the road bee test, so you put the toothpick in there, stir it up and draw it out. If it ropes out like an inch or so, and then it's like really elastic and snap back. So it's always good to kind of check that off the list. There's also,
What should we do if we find that?
if you find American Foulbrood or think you might have it, call me, call the apiary inspector, like me or someone else. You can email, Karen Second, the state apiarist, and just like put that on the radar and she'll reach out to us if you can't find our numbers.
So the elastic would be Foulbrood?
Yeah,
The elastic.
that's right. So,
Probably have the ropey snap kids.
if you stick a toothpick in enough things, like you saw her put it in with the tweezers or whatever, like it can be all goopy and gross. You can get like fibrous material that kind of hang off the toothpick. That's not American Foulbrood. And American Foulbrood's are really kind of snappy and elastic. I was working, I did an inspection just yesterday probably, and I looked at some deadouts and we found the formalin virus and so he just been first in the cell, just like that picture. So again, points to mites. So looking for that is good. Formalin virus, I started calling it stringling, the wings don't inflate, kind of curly like that.
So what about chill brood, Jeff, with the perforation?
Yeah, exactly. So it depends on the bee's died, right? So if they get chill, if the brood is dying under a capping, then it's very common for the bees to kind of investigate that, and ideally the colony is strong enough and they can remove it, and that's the end of it. So like the best beekeepers are good problem solvers. Every time you take a lid off of the hive, there's some sort of problem, something that could be better. And it's our job as beekeepers to identify it and to do the work. The way I do it is we should be doing the work that's hard for the bees, right? It's gonna take them weeks to clean off all these dead bees off the bottom board, or like, whatever's on there. It'll take you a second, and then you can have the bees working on stuff that we can't do, collecting nectar, pollen, caring for the brood. So that's kind of my philosophy. Mice get in hives, and I just read something that kind of new, I guess, but I found something new, I guess. A mouse is commonly will chew through the comb, where a shrew will only eat down to the midrib, the foundation. So I thought that was interesting. Maybe that's not true, but I read that.
Are we talking about wax foundation or plastic foundation?
Wax foundation, I would think. Although that's obviously.
Say that again.
Mice can chew through plastic too.
Oh, I know. That's why I was asking.
That's the second. And they, especially dead bees, they don't live in a hive. So let's kind of check it out nightly or whatever, and chew on bees. You can find like just the 4 axes, I think. So it kind of stumps a lot of beekeepers. So there's all sorts of things that we can find in there. It might take a lifetime to really learn enough to be able to understand everything that you're seeing.
Jeff, do we ever taste the feces to work out what it is, whether it's sugar crystals?
I haven't been that place. In the hive yesterday, I looked at, you saw the frass on the upper cell wall, and you saw sugar crystals on the bottom, and wax. If they got colonies get robbed out, that's another good indicator to look for. Jagged wax patterns and wax flakes on the.
Who killed this hive?
Say it again.
Who killed the hive? I'm waiting.
Yeah, I mean, there's things that point to mites, and mites kill a lot of hives, and a lot of new beekeepers and even experienced beekeepers. Like, it seems like the default is to undertreat. So it might take you years and years to realize, like, oh, most beekeepers are treating 3 times a year, not just 1 time. So that's like a really big lesson to learn. Also, using the right miticides at the right time of year. It's very common for beekeepers to use a formic acid treatment in the summer, and then honey supers are off, then Iqbal or Eckel in the fall, and then oxalic acid based in the wintertime. So anybody's treating less than that, like, and lose any bees, think about moving up to that kind of place. Not that that's the gold standard, like there's a million ways to do it. But I think a lot of people have pretty good success with that. And if they're using a lot of these, I'm trying to default to that and then adjust it to meet the needs.
I'm concerned about the screening.
Yeah,
I would get rid of that screening.
yeah. It's,
Oh, you're talking about the feed or the bottom,
Feed.
the feed screen?
I put the sugar
So-
right on top of the frame.
So the reason I did this is because I got a feeder from the auction, from CCBA auction. And so one year I had 4 hives and I put shim on top. So I had 3 normal shims that I made myself. And then I'm like, oh, what the hell? Let me try this thing I got from the CCBA. And in my opinion, because the shims were just open, they had to be placed over the inner cover. And the only way they could feed was to come up through the inner cover and to get to the sugar. Whereas the feeder, they could access the whole thing. So I was like, oh, this is great. I was gonna make,
Or you get her covered for winter.
Put the shim under the inner cover.
You can put a sheet of
put the food
newspaper
in it.
down, they can chew through, which is the mounting cap.
so I could just put the sugar right on top of the frames. Yeah, and I didn't think, well,
Especially on a relatively smaller, on bigger cluster, they can move around and access, but on a smaller cluster, the closer you can get that sugar to the top of the frames, the easier it is for them to access it.
Okay.
and if there's like more than bee space gap, then like, it might be a million pounds of food development, but they can't reach it, right?
Gotcha.
And it's just sort of,
Some sugar they seem to like better than others. I sense that if the sugar is dry,
yeah, they need a lot of water to process that.
but the sugar actually traps it. Like my hives, sugar gets trapped in the water.
The moisture.
And they love it.
Yeah.
So I just put paper down, shim, and then just dump tons of sugar on top of that paper. They can break to the thing.
We use like fondant and putting it in a Ziploc bag and putting the bottom of the bag, put that on, it stays moist, that's an option too, isn't that?
So Donna, I actually thought that pipe started there from the aspect that got too cold and they couldn't move the cluster to get.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I hate to say it, but I agree with Tim.
He doesn't like.
But Tim has the right answer here. What's missing on this, what's missing on all these frames? Food,
Oh, yeah.
right? There's no food in this hive. So the only food that these bees were surviving on is what was over there.
It's a combination of the bites and the back and forth.
It's always combinations.
Yeah.
All hives are sick. All hives are sick. It's a matter of how sick are they? I mean, all hives have mites, all hives have the foreign wing virus. It's trying to keep those levels below a threshold so your bees aren't sick, right? So they're infected but not sick, they're infested but not sick.
That's why I have a little mask on all my bees.
But these, as Jeff said, these bees died after the new year. These bees obviously were queen right. These bees obviously were producing brood. There's no food anywhere on these frames and their access to food was above them. And that slide, there was no food there. And their food consumption goes up a lot in January and February and they ran out of food. And that they may have been sick and they may not have been able to, there wasn't much food to access. So in my mind, the bees starved. And I saw a lot of this year, so I'm an expert in bees starving, unfortunately, so.
One of the other inspectors, was kind of joking and saying, I read the same thing on all these inspections, later in the season. Give it a try. That's been those time like this. So a lot of times they do go kind of hand in hand.
Yeah, why didn't they get the stores? Were they sick in the fall and these bees were compromised, so they didn't forage adequately and therefore.
Populations important, like for my own bees, I talk a lot about bees wall to wall. A lot of new beekeepers especially will add the boxes, like they might not draw out the frames all the way to the wall. If that's the case, like it's not a mistake to add that box, but you should, what I like to do is to move those frames of foundation, not totally drawn out, up to the second box and take a frame of brood, keeping the brood together and drop that back down into the bottom box, the frame and nectar, whatever makes sense. But then get the, spread out the brood nest and you get these wall to wall and then they'll go up, whereas otherwise they like the chimney like that. You never draw out those frames in the bottom, and then when you're getting ready for winter, you start to minimize the hive, and then you realize like, oh, they got a whole box of foundation down here, basically.
Yeah, and there's no point in wintering with frames that have no resources on it. So you could have made the art at this hive. I'm not saying Monday morning quarterback. I realized that maybe this hive would have been better off in the meat box for the winter in a smaller space, especially if the outside frames had no resources on them. I have them there, right? in some ways, so. You know, you ask 4 beekeepers and you get 4 opinions.
No. I used to own down there. Well, winter big stacks, the boxes of honey behind, and now I open a little, yeah, I try and take them down. And just leaving the box of honey,
Feed them, I know.
a lot of beekeepers will just like leave a box of honey. And I find that it's not the same as either taking it, leaving it, feeding the brood nest. For me, I want the bees to sit and have access, you know, again, bees wall to wall, they're touching all of the resources. I'm not asking them to move up and find all the food above them. Sometimes it gets cold, sometimes they break cluster, you know, that things can happen.
So Jeff, are you saying you take off all your honey and you just feed?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, so for me, I don't, some years this is not true, but I don't put any faith in the fall flow. So I'll pull my honey in the week of July, I generally pull my honey. And then, if I'm smart, I'll like feed that, you know, August and get my hives closed up to wait. But generally I don't, and whatever the fall flow is going straight into the brood nest. For me, it's mostly double deeps, but I do run from single. So it's kind of nice to have things as standardized as you can. So ideally, all the mediums are off the hives, the deeps are there. Hopefully get some sort of fall flow. If my hives, my box is heavy, and then I'm good. But if not, then I'll feed and then it's funny to me that emergency feeding with fountain and sugar, it's standard procedure. It's not an emergency for most mediums. So maybe that's not a mistake, but I tend to use it as an emergency. So ideally I feed liquid, get the hive up to weight. I mean, I don't have to do emergency feeding. If things go wrong, then I have that as a backup.
And I think what's cool, what you're hearing is that you're continually learning, right? I mean, we've both been 10, 15 years now, and we still don't have it figured out, right? So I can only imagine if you're new at this and you're just trying to process it, you just process it in chunks and you learn along, continuing to learn along the way.
Two things. Do you have handouts for us or can you put handouts out if you want to get in touch with you? And two, the most important thing, will you come back to another meeting?
This is a great meeting stuff. This is.
Yeah, we finally found.
Yeah.
And Jeff's on beach chat every Friday night.
So if someone has a hive to inspect in the local area, Jeff can claim that as a business expense and can actually write off
There you go.
the rest of it coming out here. So if you time it properly, I'm sure he'll be in the area anyway.